There is a specific kind of stillness that descends after something enormous has moved through a place. Not silence in the absence of sound, but silence in the presence of something that has been fully felt. You have been in the middle of one of the most electrically charged astrological weeks of the entire year. The solar eclipse in Aries, the exact conjunction of Saturn, Mars and Mercury in the same degree of the same fire sign, the activation of Chiron, the sextile between all of that Aries energy and Pluto in Aquarius. The sky has not been subtle, and neither have you been. Something in you has been burning, reorganizing, clarifying, pressing against the edges of the life you were living before all of this began. You have felt it in the chest, in the way you wake up before your alarm, in the strange urgency that has been sitting behind your breastbone for the better part of a week. April 22nd, 2026 is the sky beginning to exhale. And the particular exhale available today is not the tired sigh of a sky that has run out of things to say. It is the release of something that has been held under enormous pressure and is now finally allowed to open. The moon has moved into Cancer. Jupiter has been sitting in Cancer since last year, expansive and generous, amplifying everything the sign holds dear, which means emotional depth, ancestral connection, the intelligence of the body, the wisdom stored not in the thinking mind, but in the felt sense of things. And today, the moon comes home to that same territory and finds Jupiter waiting. This is what changes on April 22nd. The fire that has been driving you all week meets water, not in opposition, in reception. Your birth chart holds answers you have been circling for years. A personal reading built from your exact birth details decodes your sun, moon and rising, reveals the karmic patterns quietly running your life, and maps your 2026 forecast month by month. You can now order a personal astrological reading. You receive a personal audio reading delivered straight to your inbox and a detailed written report you can return to whenever you need it. This is not general astrology. This is your chart, read for you alone. Find the link in the description and your reading arrives within 48 hours. There is a reason astrologers pay close attention to the moon's movement through Cancer when Jupiter is also present in that sign. In any other year, a moon in Cancer is already a significant tonal shift. Cancer is the moon's home sign, the territory where she moves most naturally, where her instincts are sharpest, where the quality she governs, memory, emotional truth, the body's knowing, intuition, the pull of what has been loved before, are all operating at full capacity. When the moon enters Cancer, even in an ordinary week, something in the collective field softens. People become more honest about what they actually feel. The hunger for comfort becomes more conscious. The need to be understood, not just tolerated, rises closer to the surface. But this is not an ordinary week, and this is not an ordinary Cancer moon. Jupiter has been in Cancer since the middle of last year, and it will remain there through the end of June 2026. Jupiter expands what it touches. It does not discriminate between pleasant truths and difficult ones. It simply amplifies the signal of whatever sign it occupies. In Cancer, that means the emotional life has been operating at a higher volume for most of 2026 already. Things have been feeling more than they usually feel. Grief has been arriving with more weight. Joy has been arriving with more fullness. The need for genuine connection, for relationships that are rooted in something real rather than something convenient, has been more difficult to ignore. What happens today is that the moon arrives into the same field Jupiter has been quietly maintaining, and the conjunction between them, the moon and Jupiter meeting in Cancer, is one of the most fundamentally generous aspects the sky produces. It does not demand transformation in the way the Aries stellium demanded it. It does not press you toward action the way Mars in Aries presses. It simply opens something. It creates a quality of receptivity that is rare, particularly in the middle of a week that has been asking you to forge, to decide, to commit, to face things you have been avoiding. Today, the sky adds to all of that, a quality it has been somewhat absent this week: grace. Grace, in astrological terms, is not the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of something that allows difficulty to be held without destroying you. The moon conjunct Jupiter in Cancer is that kind of grace. It is the energetic equivalent of being allowed to sit down after a long walk, not because the walk is over, not because there is nowhere left to go, but because the next step requires that you first acknowledge how far you have already come. To understand what the moon meeting Jupiter in Cancer is actually doing in the sky on April 22nd, it helps to step back from the language of feelings and into the language of functions. Every planetary combination performs a specific operation on the collective field. The question is not just what it means symbolically, but what it is doing structurally to the experience of being alive in a body on this particular day. The moon governs the rhythm of emotional processing. She moves faster than any other body in the sky, completing a full cycle through all 12 signs in roughly 28 days. Her speed is the reason your emotional experience of a given week can shift so dramatically from one day to the next, even when the slower planets are holding their positions. What the moon does is not introduce new energies so much as it activates the energies already present. She is the activator, the timer, the hand that strikes the bell. When she moves through a sign, she rings the bell of that sign's themes, and whatever slower planets are waiting there receive a moment of amplification and expression. Jupiter governs expansion but also meaning. This is the part of Jupiter that gets underemphasized in popular astrology, where the focus tends to stay on abundance, luck, and growth. Those things are real expressions of Jupiter's energy. But underneath them, the more essential function of Jupiter is the assignment of meaning. Jupiter is the force in the sky that turns experience into understanding. It is the planet of the philosophical stance, of the world view, of the story you tell yourself about why things happen and what they are for. When Jupiter is well placed, the experiences you move through begin to cohere into something you can learn from. When Jupiter is difficult, experiences feel random, disconnected, purposeless. In Cancer, Jupiter has been working all year to assign emotional meaning, not to make difficult emotions disappear, but to make them legible, to help you understand why you feel the things you feel, to reveal the roots of emotional patterns that seemed inexplicable before, to connect present experiences to ancestral ones, to help you see that some of what you carry is not only yours, but was handed to you across generations and can now finally be understood clearly enough to be released. This is deep, slow work. You may not have recognized it happening in real time, but you have likely noticed its effects in the form of a deepening relationship to your own emotional life over the last several months. A greater willingness to be honest about what you actually want. A lower tolerance for situations that require you to suppress or perform emotions rather than actually feel them. A growing awareness of which relationships nourish you and which ones ask you to be smaller than you are. Today, the moon strikes that Jupiter bell. Whatever work Jupiter in Cancer has been doing in your interior life, today it rings clearly. You may feel an unexpected wave of clarity about something emotional that has been vague for months. You may find that a feeling you have been carrying without understanding it suddenly has a name, a shape, a story attached to it. You may find yourself more moved than usual by ordinary things, a conversation, a piece of music, a memory that surfaces without apparent cause. This is not sentimentality. This is Jupiter doing its job through the moon's activation, turning what you feel into something you can understand, and in understanding, begin to use. The other thing the moon conjunct Jupiter in Cancer does is create a genuine opening in the relational field. Cancer rules connection through familiarity, through shared history, through the sense that someone truly knows you. Jupiter expands that territory today. This does not mean dramatic developments or sudden confessions in every direction. It means that the quality of connection available in ordinary moments is higher today than it has been all week. A conversation that might have stayed on the surface on a different day goes deeper today. A silence between two people carries more warmth. The barriers we maintain between our interior lives and the people we care about are slightly thinner, not because anything external has changed, but because the emotional atmosphere of the day makes authenticity feel more natural and slightly less threatening. This is the window the Moon-Jupiter conjunction opens on April 22nd. Not a portal of explosive transformation, but a door into your own emotional interior, held open by the most generous combination the Cancer sky can produce. While the Moon and Jupiter are holding this quieter, warmer quality in Cancer, it would be a mistake to assume the sky around them has fallen entirely still. The Aries concentration that defined this week is still very much present, still active, still asking things of you. Saturn is now in its retrograde shadow, which means it has crossed the degree it will return to when it stations retrograde in July. This is significant because it marks the beginning of a longer review process, one that will take most of the summer and ask you to return to the decisions and structures that are being built right now and examine whether they were built on honest foundations. Mercury is in Aries, moving forward now and carrying the mental clarity and directness that Aries brings to communication. After weeks of Mercury's time in more diffuse territory, including its retrograde period in Pisces earlier this year, the messenger planet in Aries is a very different energy. Aries Mercury does not soften its delivery. It does not circle the point. It says the thing directly. And with Saturn in the same sign, the things Mercury is currently inclined to say tend to be the things that have practical consequences, the communications that actually matter, the conversations about responsibility, direction, commitment, and truth. This is not a week for vague expressions of intention. Aries Mercury in proximity to Saturn demands specificity. It asks you to mean what you say and say only what you mean. Mars is also still in Aries, the sign it rules, which means the planet of drive and action is at full strength. Mars in Aries does not know how to wait patiently. It moves. It initiates. It compels you toward action, even when the action is not fully formed. After the intensity of the stellium, you might expect Mars to be depleted, but that is not how Mars in its home sign operates. If anything, the passage through the stellium has clarified Mars's direction. The uncertainty has burned off. What remains is a very clear sense of what you want to move toward and a restlessness that will not allow you to stay stationary for long. So what you have on April 22nd is genuinely interesting from a structural standpoint. The fire of the Aries sky has not extinguished. Mercury, Mars, and Saturn are still there, still pressing, still asking for honest action and concrete direction. But above them, in Cancer, the Moon and Jupiter are creating a container of emotional intelligence and receptivity that the fire alone cannot produce. The invitation is not to choose between the two, it is to let them work together. The Cancer Moon does not ask you to stop moving forward. It asks that the movement forward comes from a place of genuine feeling rather than reactive urgency. It asks that the decisions being made under the Aries influence this week are grounded not only in logic and strategy, but in an honest answer to the question of what you actually want, what actually matters to you, what kind of life you are trying to build, and why. Jupiter in Cancer is the meaning underneath the Mercury in Aries clarity. The emotional truth underneath the Martian drive, the why beneath the what. When the fire and the water are integrated rather than opposed, what you get is not steam, but direction, purpose, the ability to act with both courage and care, to make decisions that are not only bold, but true. The opposition is also worth naming. Venus is in the final degrees of Taurus on April 22nd, preparing for her ingress into Gemini on April 23rd. Final degrees of any sign carry a concentrated quality, a kind of summing up, a last opportunity to integrate the sign's lessons before the planet moves on. Venus in late Taurus has been asking you to be honest about your values, to look clearly at where you are directing your resources, your attention, your pleasure, and whether what you are investing in is genuinely aligned with what you treasure. She is squaring in a wide opposition to the Cancer axis, which creates a mild but real tension between what feels secure and familiar and what feels alive and possible. This tension resolves when Venus moves into Gemini, but today it asks a question: what are you willing to let evolve? and Uranus is sitting at 29 degrees of Taurus on April 22nd, right at the edge of his own ingress into Gemini, which perfects on April 25th. 29 degrees of any sign is called the anaretic degree, and it carries the quality of urgency and completion. Uranus at 29 Taurus is finishing a 7-year passage through the sign of fixed Earth, a passage that has fundamentally restructured how you relate to security, material resources, the body, and the systems that support ordinary life. That restructuring is not quite complete. In these final days of Uranus in Taurus, something about your relationship to what you own, what grounds you, and what you consider stable may receive a final clarification. Not a crisis, but a recognition. Something you have been circling for years crystallizes into a clear understanding just before Uranus moves on to entirely new territory. This is the sky of April 22nd. Not a single dominant theme, but a layered conversation between fire that is still burning, water that is open and receiving, earth that is completing a long cycle, and air that is waiting just at the threshold. There is one more presence in the April 22nd sky that deserves its own space, and it is one that does not announce itself loudly. Neptune is in Aries at approximately 2 degrees, and while it is not forming an exact aspect to anything in the immediate picture, its background presence in the Aries stellium zone has been one of the more subtle and important factors of this entire week. Neptune in Aries is a relatively new and historically significant transit. Neptune spent the last 15 years in Pisces, the sign it rules, moving through an era defined by collective spiritual seeking, the blurring of boundaries, the rise of empathy as a social value, and also by confusion, self-deception, and the difficulty of knowing what is real when everything feels permeable. Neptune in Pisces was, in many ways, a dissolving of edges, the edges between self and other, the edges between the personal and the collective, the edges between what is concrete and what is felt. Neptune in Aries is a different operation. Aries is the sign of the individual self, the sign of the warrior, the pioneer, the one who acts on instinct and claims space in the world. Neptune moving through Aries brings a dissolving not of boundaries with others, but of boundaries within the self. The fixed ideas about who you are and what you are capable of. The internalized definitions that were handed to you by culture, by family, by your own previous experiences of yourself. Neptune in Aries is, at its highest expression, the capacity to act from a place that has not yet been named, to move towards something that does not yet have a clear form, to lead with the spirit of a self that is still becoming rather than the certainty of a self that has already been defined. On April 22nd, with the Moon in Cancer activating emotional receptivity and Jupiter in Cancer amplifying the capacity for meaning, Neptune in Aries is adding a specific flavor to the day's inner atmosphere. There is something dissolving in the picture of who you thought you had to be in order for your emotional life to be okay. The Aries fire all week has been pressing you toward action, toward decision, toward forward movement. Neptune in Aries, held gently by the Cancer moon, is whispering something underneath that pressure. You do not have to have it all figured out before you allow yourself to feel at home in your own life. The certainty you have been waiting for before you allowed yourself to feel at peace does not have to arrive first. The peace can exist alongside the uncertainty. The comfort of Cancer, the warmth of the Moon and Jupiter meeting, is available to you right now, not as a reward for having resolved everything, but as a quality of being that you can choose to inhabit even while the work continues. This is a subtle and important message for April 22nd. The week has been insisting on action, on clarity, on burning away what is no longer true, and that insistence has been correct. But the risk of a week saturated with Aries energy is that you begin to measure the value of a day entirely by how much ground you covered, how many decisions you made, how much you moved. Neptune in Aries, channeled through the Cancer moon and Jupiter, introduces a corrective. There is also value in the day that you understood something, that you felt something fully. that you sat inside a moment long enough to let it actually reach you rather than simply moving through it on the way to the next thing. What is dissolving on April 22nd under Neptune's quiet influence is the false opposition between stillness and forward movement. The idea that you can only be making progress when you are actively doing something. The Cancer Moon and Jupiter are showing you that the interior work of processing, integrating and genuinely feeling what has happened to you this week is not separate from the Aries work of action and initiation. It is the foundation of it. The emotional intelligence that Cancer and Jupiter are expanding in you today is not a rest from the week's intensity. It is the resource that allows the week's intensity to produce something lasting rather than simply exhausting you. Neptune in Aries supports this understanding at a level that goes beneath language. You may not be able to articulate it precisely, but there will be a quality to moments today where something that has felt like pressure simply eases, not because the situation has changed, but because your relationship to it has shifted slightly, where you stop insisting on perfect clarity before allowing yourself to breathe, where the enormity of the week's events stops feeling like a weight you have to carry and begins to feel like something that happened to you in the best possible sense, something that moved through you and left you different in ways that are, at root, good. This is the particular grace that Neptune in Aries offers today in conversation with the Moon and Jupiter in Cancer. Not the dissolving of the self, but the dissolving of the rigid idea of the self that prevents you from experiencing the emotional spaciousness available in this moment. April 22nd is not an island. It sits within a sequence of astrological events that extends through the rest of the week and into the early days of May, and understanding where today fits in that sequence helps you understand how to use it most wisely. Tomorrow, April 23rd, Venus moves into Gemini. This ingress has been building all week as Venus crossed the final degrees of Taurus. When she enters Gemini, the quality of relating and connection in the collective field shifts noticeably. Taurus Venus values consistency, sensory pleasure, the reliability of what is known and enjoyed. Gemini Venus is different. She is curious, communicative, interested in the exchange of ideas and perspectives as a form of intimacy. She finds pleasure in variety and in the mental stimulation that comes from genuine conversation. She is attracted to people and situations that teach her something new. This shift does not happen abruptly. You will begin to feel its approach today in the form of a slightly increased appetite for connection and communication that goes beyond the surface, for conversations that actually go somewhere interesting. 2 days after that, on April 25th, Uranus enters Gemini. This is one of the most significant astrological events of 2026, and arguably of the entire decade. Uranus's 7-year passage through Taurus is ending. The restructuring of material reality, of how we relate to resources, security and the body, that Uranus in Taurus initiated back in 2018 is reaching its completion. The ground it covered will not be uncovered. The changes to financial systems, to how we understand stability, to our relationship with the natural world and with the technology embedded in physical existence, those changes are now integrated into the new baseline of ordinary life. Uranus in Gemini points in a different direction entirely. Air, communication, information, the ways human minds connect and exchange, the systems of education, language, and shared understanding, all of these come under Uranus's revolutionary influence for the next 7 years beginning on April 25th. Today, April 22nd, is the last moment of genuine quiet before that shift arrives. The Moon and Jupiter in Cancer are providing you with an interior space, a room of emotional intelligence and warmth that you would do well to inhabit as fully as possible today, not because nothing else is coming, but because what is coming will require you to have done this interior work first. The clarity about what you feel, the understanding of what you actually want and why, the honest recognition of your emotional needs and your emotional resources that the Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer is making available today, all of that will be essential grounding material as Uranus enters Gemini and begins accelerating the pace of change in the world around you. There is also the matter of the Aries stellium's integration. The days immediately following a major planetary pileup are some of the most important in any astrological sequence, and they tend to be underestimated precisely because they lack the dramatic energy of the event itself. The eclipse happened on April 17th. The stellium perfected on April 19th and 20th. The visible spectacle is over. What happens now, in the days between the event and the next threshold, is the actual integration. The meaning of what occurred is not fixed at the moment of the aspect. It develops in the days after, as the experience is absorbed, processed, and slowly translated into changed behavior, changed perspective, changed relationship to yourself. April 22nd is one of those integration days, and it is arguably the most important one this week, because the Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer creates the exact internal conditions that integration requires. You need emotional space to understand what changed. You need the receptivity that Cancer provides. You need the meaning-making function that Jupiter adds. You need the dissolving of rigidity that Neptune in Aries quietly supports in the background. Today gives you all of that simultaneously. How do you work with it? The answer is simpler than you might expect. You do not need a ritual or a practice or a system. You need to be willing to spend some portion of today in actual contact with what you feel, as distinct from what you think about what you feel. Those are different things. What you think about your emotional life can be managed, narrated, organized into a story that makes sense. What you actually feel is often messier, more layered, and more honest than the story. Today, the sky is giving you permission to be honest with yourself at the level that lies beneath the story. Not to perform emotional intelligence, but to actually have it. For each of the 12 signs, this will land in different territory of your chart, and therefore different areas of your life. But the underlying invitation is the same regardless of your sign. Something in your emotional life is available to be understood today more clearly than it was yesterday. Something that has felt tangled or heavy or confusing carries the possibility of becoming, at least in part, legible. Not solved, not finished, not resolved into perfect peace, but understood. And understanding is the first necessary step toward everything else. For Aries, the Cancer Moon and Jupiter are illuminating the territory of home, family, and the emotional foundations that everything else in your life is built on. After a week of being pressed to define yourself through action, today asks you to consider the roots. What are you building toward, and is the ground beneath it stable enough to hold what you are trying to construct? For Taurus, the emphasis falls on communication and the immediate relational field. Something you have known but not said, felt but not expressed, understood but kept interior, is asking today to be brought into language. Not necessarily spoken aloud to another person, but at minimum acknowledged clearly to yourself. Venus in your late degrees is also reminding you of your own value before she moves into new territory tomorrow. For Gemini, the Cancer Moon and Jupiter are activating the area of your chart associated with resources, self-worth, and the material foundations of your life. This is subtle territory for Gemini, which tends to move quickly through ideas rather than settling into the felt sense of things. Today invites you to slow down slightly and ask an honest question. Where in your material life are you undervaluing yourself, and what would it look like to stop doing that? For Cancer, the Moon is in your sign, and Jupiter is amplifying your own emotional field. This is your day in a way that is distinct from the rest of the week. Your intuition is heightened, your emotional radar is accurate, and the clarity available to you about your own inner life is exceptional. The risk for Cancer today is not that things are too quiet, but that you are feeling so much that it becomes difficult to organize into anything actionable. Give yourself permission to simply receive without immediately needing to respond. For Leo, the Cancer Moon and Jupiter are operating in your house of the hidden, the interior, the private self. This is the territory of the psyche that you do not generally put on display. Something from that territory is surfacing today, not dramatically but persistently. It wants to be acknowledged before Venus moves into the area of your chart associated with resources and before Uranus arrives to shake up your communication landscape. This is your moment for private honesty. For Virgo, the Cancer Moon illuminates your house of community, friendship, and collective purpose. After a week of intense personal pressure, today invites you to consider what your relationships to others actually look like right now. Not the relationships you maintain out of obligation or habit, but the ones that genuinely nourish you. Jupiter's presence here suggests expansion, and the question is whether your social world has grown to match who you are currently becoming, or whether you are still circling a version of community that belongs to a self you are in the process of leaving behind. For Libra, the Cancer axis is your career and professional territory. Jupiter in Cancer has been quietly expanding your sense of what you are capable of in the world, your professional self-image, your relationship to ambition, your sense of what kind of contribution you are here to make. Today, the moon activates all of that with a warmth and a receptivity that can make things clear. What does the work you do actually mean to you? Not what does it look like from the outside, but what does it feel like from the inside? For Scorpio, the Cancer moon and Jupiter are in your house of philosophy, travel, expansion, and belief. After the intensity of this week, something in your worldview is shifting. The story you tell yourself about how reality works, about what is possible, about what the events of your life mean, is being updated. Jupiter here is generous. It is expanding your capacity to find meaning in what has felt difficult. Today you may find that a situation you have been interpreting narrowly reveals a larger frame. There is more available to you than the version of the story you have been carrying. For Sagittarius, the Cancer moon is in your house of depth, transformation, and shared resources. This is intimate territory for a sign that prefers to operate in wide open spaces. But the expansiveness of Jupiter in Cancer makes the depth feel more manageable. Something about how you share financially, emotionally, energetically with the people closest to you is up for review. The question today is not just what you give, but what you allow yourself to receive. Sagittarius tends toward generosity in one direction. Today invites an honest accounting of the other. For Capricorn, Cancer is your house of partnership, and Jupiter has been expanding your relationship landscape all year. Today the moon activates what Jupiter has been quietly building. The question of who your people are, who deserves the kind of loyalty and commitment that Capricorn brings, and whether the partnerships currently in your life are truly reciprocal, is pressing gently but persistently. This is not about crisis, it is about clarity. The Cancer moon in your relationship house is asking you to feel your partnerships honestly, rather than simply managing them efficiently. For Aquarius, the Cancer moon and Jupiter are in your 6th house of daily rhythms, work, health, and the ordinary practices of living. After a week of enormous sky pressure, your body may be carrying more than you have acknowledged. The Cancer moon in this territory is an invitation to attend to yourself at a practical and physical level. Jupiter here suggests that there is more support available to you in your daily life than you have been accepting. Something about how you structure your ordinary days is ready to change in a way that is more sustainable and more genuinely nourishing. The Pisces, the Cancer moon and Jupiter are in your 5th house of creativity, joy, pleasure, and the self-expression that comes not from productivity but from play. After the weight of this week, today is actually an invitation to lighten slightly. Jupiter in Cancer in your 5th house is one of the more genuinely pleasurable configurations in your chart this year, and the moon activates it today with warmth and feeling. What brings you actual joy? Not what should bring you joy according to the story you tell yourself about what kind of person you are, but what actually does. That is the question Cancer and Jupiter are asking you today, and it deserves an honest answer. What all 12 signs share today is access to a quality of emotional honesty that the week's fire has been burning toward but could not fully reach on its own. The Aries. Energy clarifies and activates. The Cancer energy understands and receives. Both are necessary. Neither is complete without the other. April 22, 2026 is the day the sky stops insisting and starts listening. The fire has done its work. The water has arrived to receive what the fire produced. And in that receiving, in that quiet between the action and the next action, something that has been trying to reach you finally does. The moon meets Jupiter in Cancer and everything gets quiet. not because nothing matters, but because the things that matter most are finally able to be heard. If this reached you today, stay with what it stirred. The sky is working on your behalf, even in its stillness. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next, because what is coming next is already gathering on the horizon, and it will be unlike anything this week has produced.